Thanks to Grammarly for supporting the Productivity Show. Grammarly is a communication tool that helps people improve their writing to be mistake-free, clear, and effective. Start writing confidently by going to grammarly.com/TPS to get 20% off a Grammarly premium account today. Welcome to the Productivity Show, a podcast by Asian Efficiency to help you maximize your productivity so you can get the important things done without having to sacrifice your health, family, and things that matter to you. We've helped tens of thousands of people save time, be happier, and become more productive. A couple weeks ago, I took a hair test that tested for mineral deficiencies. I learned about this when I met Barton Scott, founder of Upgraded Formulas, that helps people identify mineral deficiencies in their bodies and then makes recommendations for you on how to optimize your health. On this episode, we go over my test results, and I didn't know what they were before we recorded. So you're going to hear my first reaction on the episode. You'll also learn how you can optimize your health to live longer, sleep better, and feel your best. I'm excited for you to listen to this episode today. You can find links to everything that we share in the show notes by going to theproductivityshow.com/267. And now, on with the show. And today with me, I have Barton Scott. Hey, Barton, how's it going?
Hey, it's going great, Dan.
I'm so excited to have you here today. We're recording here in my apartment here in Austin, Texas.
Yeah, excited to be here.
And we're going to be talking about health and optimizing your health specifically because you have a really interesting company in what you do. So we'll dive into that a little bit later. But yeah, I'm really excited because we at Asian Efficiency always talk about the T framework: time, energy, and intention. And if you have all three currencies figured out, then you can live a really productive life. And energy is one of those things where I believe where if you optimize your health in the most optimal way, you will have a ton of energy to be focused, to get stuff done, to be really Asian efficient, as I like to say. So I'm really excited to dive into that today with you.
Same here. Really excited.
So let's talk about your top 3 favorite resources, because that's the way we always kick things off here at the Productivity Show. So in 90 seconds or less, can you share with the audience what your top 3 favorite resources are?
Absolutely. I'd be happy to. So when you asked me this question, my mind initially went to what was the things that made the biggest shift for me in the last 10 years in my life. And I can say, and this is part of the reason why I do what I do, but hair testing and upgraded magnesium, those 2 different things have really changed my life and the life of a lot of people from an energy standpoint and from a basically knowing where you are in your health. So instead of guessing and using intuition, using a test and a great testing method. You can find both of those. I'll give you the URL if that's helpful. It's upgradedformulas.com. The third thing is tm.org. That's Transcendental Meditation. That has really changed my life. It's rewired my brain, essentially, as all meditation does, or as anything you do does, but it's been particularly helpful in this case instead of harmful. So those are my 3.
Cool. So we'll have links to everything in the show notes, so be sure to check that out. So Barton, can you share with everybody your story? Like, who are you? What's Upgraded Formulas, and what made you start this?
Yeah, certainly. Well, really, the journey as it relates to Upgraded Formulas for me starts back in high school. End of high school, I was a wrestler and football player, but wrestling was really my main sport. And I because of that, I excelled at it, but I kind of pushed my body for years and years, like a lot of you probably listening. And because of that, I was chronically deficient in a bunch of areas. Now, I didn't know those words and understand those terms, but I went through college, it became worse. Eventually, I took things like Vyvanse, even though I had a prescription. If you don't know that name, it's similar to Adderall. All of these things combined for a perfect storm, had a difficult breakup, all sorts of these, things that we live through as people, meant that by the time I was 24 or so, I had brain fog, I had severe brain fog, and I had this clear black and white picture, before and after, of my brain working really well and then not so well. So when I finally I did thousands of dollars of testing, figuring out how is it that I can be really fit, have a six pack, and feel so unhealthy, and be eating a great diet and quote unquote doing all the right things, behaving, having good relationships, all these things I was lucky enough to have, being born in the U.S., living in the in a first world country. What I realized when I took a hair test finally was I got some actionable data, and that's what we'll talk about today. What I realized soon, so it was a wave of relief, okay, but soon followed with a wave of, oh my God, what do I do? Because I'm taking a lot of the things I'm deficient in. And that was a real moment right there. And I didn't have the answer right away, but I was frustrated and angry. And beyond just the wasted money was, well, what's the solution here? If I'm low in magnesium, for example, or I'm low in manganese, or I'm low in chromium or something that I'm taking, what's the solution? So is it take more of it? That wasn't the solution. What it really was from a chemistry perspective was absorbing what you took in, and that was essential. So that is something that I've now developed using my chemical engineering background as a chemist, and my understanding as a nutritionist and working with patients, my understanding of what's missing as being an athlete. Just a life journey. We all have this journey that leads us to a place where if we do it right, I feel like we use our problems to turn into gifts for other people and in ourselves, heal ourselves along the way. So that's been kind of my love letter to the world that I can give at this point, and it's helped a lot of people. So hopefully in this conversation, it'll help you too.
So what I'm hearing from you, and based on other conversations that we've had in the past, what started this journey for you and this company, Upgraded Formulas, was basically what you do is you test people to see where they're deficient in certain minerals, and then basically give them the proper guidance of this is what you should take, and then you also create your own supplements to kind of help with that. But what actually I found most interesting was we were having brunch not too long ago, and you were talking about absorption rates, of how most supplements that we take today have terrible absorption rates. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, certainly. So 4% is pretty abysmal. I think we'd all agree. But you take something like magnesium oxide, absorbs about 4%. On the high end, you're looking at 20% across the board for something you pull off a quote unquote reputable store shelf. And that's true for chelated. That's true for, just so many of the things you're taking. What that means beyond I absorb 20%, so 0.2 times, say, 30 is $6 of value that I actually absorb. Beyond the wasted money, what's way more important is the wasted health, the wasted opportunity to heal, the wasted opportunity to transform and transcend your current reality in health, and therefore not procrastinate as much because you have that little bit or maybe a lot extra of a bump to take on that, to clear that hurdle. So that correlation to me was incredibly evident, and it's something that I'm, with your help today, just helping people see too.
So when I look at a supplement label, let's say I take a multivitamin or something, and it says, hey, there's a certain amount of vitamin C in there. As a regular person like myself, when I see that, I think, okay, this is the amount that I'm going to get into my body, right? But what you have found is that basically whatever that amount says, on average, it is anywhere between 4 and, you said 20%?
20%, yeah.
Right. So if I'm supposed to get like 1,000 units of something, I maybe get 40 units of that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that is actually very little.
Right. Yeah. It's shocking, and it's disappointing, and it gets people angry, and people usually have one of two reactions. They get aggravated or upset and go, all right, what's the solution? Or they go, what's the next thought? Because I don't want to think about the implications of that. And those are both fair reactions. I've had both of those. I've experienced both of those. And you go, well, let me think about something else maybe. So, and I want people to be able to think about other things. So I wanted to solve this for people. And that's why, if you look at a hair test that you do with us and you look at a consultation, my goal really wasn't to just tell you and although it's a huge step to tell you what's missing or what could be fixed, but to actually provide you some solutions that are efficacious.
So you, with a chemical engineering background, you basically saw that, okay, these supplements, they're terrible in the sense that their absorption rate is so low. So you want to start to create your own supplements. And you mentioned how certain things are like too small or too big for the cells to absorb. Can you kind of like go into that?
Yeah, certainly. So our red blood cells are about 10,000 nanometers in size. Just remember the number 10,000. And then the minerals you're trying to absorb, typically, those are around 50 to 80,000 nanometers. So that's what, 5 to 8 of a multiple. All right, so the important part's coming up. So that math doesn't work. And you wonder, well, okay, so how do I get any nutrition? Well, it's being processed through your digestive system. And eventually some of that's making into the bloodstream and into the red blood cells, into the mitochondria. What we decided to do instead is, well, what if you could just skip the digestive process and go straight into the mitochondria of the red blood cell? And that sounds crazy complicated, but really when you realize there's a threshold of, say, 100 nanometers, you get under that threshold with consistency on a particle size. So, and then now you start to solve problems. And, the digestive system has plenty of other uses. It's not going to be out of work by any means. But now we get to use the body at an accelerated rate. And you'll see, not only does this work and will you see great results with it when you use it correctly, but you'll start to see this more in medicine as well, this approach, because it's just much more effective. Now, with mineral supplements, what I did is I chose minerals specifically, not vitamins or anything else, like herbs from Ayurveda or anything else. Instead, I chose minerals because that's the biggest leverage, the biggest point of leverage in the body. And if we can fix that, if we can turn that lever, we can do some amazing things with just incredibly low downside effects. They're water soluble, so you pee out extras versus being fat soluble. So that's a key. But yeah, it's quite transformative to see someone, and that's what I really love most, is just seeing people light up and change and come up to me 2 weeks later or a week later after taking what they should be taking because they knew they were testing and not guessing. And that transformation is pretty amazing to witness.
Yeah, you said something really interesting there, which is, because I hear this all the time from other people, you take a multivitamin or something and they go, oh, it doesn't really help because you're going to pee it out anyway. Is there a certain truth to that?
There's some truth to that. What if I told you it might be worse than that? So some of these, there's a couple different things. We don't have time to cover it all today, but a few things I'd like to touch on is something called antagonism. And that means when certain minerals or certain constituents of a product interfere with the others. So iron, for example, you'll see that in a lot of multivitamins, and it can render a lot of other, if not the entire product, a lot of other constituents useless. And then in some cases cause free radical oxidation. So now you're paying for damage to your body on a cellular level. So we don't currently have an iron supplement. We will in the future, but I'm hesitant to have people just buy that supplement because there's more downside effect to taking certain things if they're just going to take it without a test. Should almost be doctor recommended. The other thing is that it's a hidden source of chlorine and other things like that, because the way those are made is they mix them in vats. Another thing is just the absorption rate is incredibly low. Yeah, there's a number of different problems with it, and it's really a scattershot approach to a specific request that our body's asking us for.
So you mentioned this hair test earlier, and I've actually taken your hair test, and we're going to be discussing my results today. And for those who are listening, I actually have no idea what we're going to be talking about, because
major props.
because I took the test, right? And we can go into the detail of how the test works, but I took the test and I have no idea what the results are and what Barton's going to tell me and what I need to do and change. So when you're going to hear my reaction, it'll be the first time, literally, that I'm hearing it for the first time. So I'm a little bit nervous, but he told me that I'll survive for the next 50 years. So I think I'll be okay. But going back to the testing.
Yeah, he's going to make it, folks. So there will be more episodes.
So when it comes to the testing, one of the things that really fascinated me was I took a blood test probably around last year. I took it through Wellness FX. It's like one of the more popular ones that I've heard from a bunch of people. So I took this test and I really wanted to do it because I wanted to figure out, okay, if I really want to start optimizing my health, I should get some accurate data because then I can start optimizing for what's insufficient, right? And it's kind of like the same approach in business or in my personal life. If I'm not happy about something, let's get the facts straight out there. We want to eliminate all sorts of stories or whatever we tell ourselves. Let's actually get the facts out there. And same thing in business and personal life and everything else. And then look at that and say, okay, what do we interpret here? And then, take action from there, right?
Yeah, that's a great, if I can jump in, that's exactly what it is. Analogy I give sometimes is, would you invest in a business if you saw a day's worth of data? Most people would say no. But yet that's what a blood test offers you. There's things we could do right now that would skew your results in an hour. And that's part of the reason why doctors often ask you to go in fasted. But what if you didn't? Or what if you were on your quote unquote best behavior for a week leading up to your doctors? And then now they're giving you recommendations. Or on the other side, what if you went out and got really drunk 3 nights before with all your friends and celebrated some amazing thing? You didn't think to mention that to your doctor, and now let's say you're a guy, your testosterone's many hundreds of points lower than it should be, and maybe now you're getting recommended for something you don't need. They'll vastly change your hormone makeup and cost you money, of course, and time, and lead you down to a place that you're dependent on things that you didn't need to have in the first place. That's a reality, and it's one that I really want to help protect against. So some of what we'll talk about. But yeah, hair gives you between 6 and 8 weeks of data. So
interesting.
So now you're looking at XY graph with multiple points or trend lines, or however you want to think of it.
Because that was the thing that piqued my interest, because like I mentioned, I took the blood test, and from what I heard from most people, that's one of the best things you can do to kind of figure out where you're sufficient and not sufficient. And then when we were having brunch, you said for minerals, at least, actually what's even more accurate is the hair.
Yeah, it's like a core sample. It's a great record, and it also travels well. A lot of blood does not travel that well. I'm glad you remembered that. It's a key point. Yeah, blood tests do fail in a lot of ways, and hair is less invasive too, frankly. And if some of you are wondering, like, well, what do I do if I shave my head or something? Well, you can use auxiliary hair from underarm, pubic, chest, forearm. You just have to have an adequate amount, and we have a scale that helps you get that right the first time. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I took that test. I had to cut some hair in some places and then put it in there and then submit it and then wait like 4 or 5 days.
Yeah, that's a great way to phrase it.
And it was actually pretty easy. So it wasn't like it didn't feel invasive whatsoever. So it was really easy, and the instructions that came with that were easy. So when it comes to like the testing side of things, what have you found the differences? Like, have you noticed any differences between men and women in general when it comes to certain like mineral deficiencies and things like that before we start diving into some specific things?
Yeah, there's what I notice is there are differences certainly between men and women. The hormone makeup is different, and minerals drive hormones. They're constituents of hormones. Magnesium for melatonin, for example. Your body doesn't produce enough melatonin if you don't have enough of the raw material, magnesium. The other things are age, life situation. Are you a woman that just had her 3rd child and she's looking to rebalance her hormones, and she's also simultaneously training for ultra marathon? These are some of the people we help, and yet we also help people at the other end of the spectrum that are already healthy and they just want to get healthier. It's really a case-by-case basis, but something that pretty much no one gets enough of, that controls hundreds of different critical things in the body, is magnesium. So getting that in a form you actually absorb is great. We have a nano powder product that does that really well. We also have a liquid product. Kind of just depends on preference for people, but one travels better than the other. So that's a thought. Iodine is another thought. We have that product really makes a difference for people. Magnesium is more of a quick, like feel it first or second night type feel. Iodine's a slower but still needed thing. A lot of people are cold sensitive, so they really need that. It also helps with brain function. So now we're talking about efficiency again. Mood as well. Magnesium and iodine both help with that. And we can get more specific later. But yeah, that's great questions, certainly.
So one of the things that I should have asked you earlier, because I'm realizing right now, is like, well, what's actually the importance of minerals, right? And what's the difference between a mineral and like a vitamin? Because I mean, talk about it, from a layman point of view.
Certainly. All right. So the best way to describe this, I'll make it really simple. The world that we live in is elemental, and we are elemental. What that means is we need minerals. We can't make them. Now, if our body has minerals that we actually absorb, minerals, light, and water, and we have enough stored body fat, I mean, we can fast for extended periods of time. What you derive from that is that minerals really do drive just a huge percentage of the things we need to do well in our body and brain. And for that reason, that's the biggest point of leverage that I can turn, the biggest lever, that I can turn for someone in their health. It's figuring out, what do you really need? What are you not getting enough of? And, can we get you more of that? And then for how long? And, this is where our consultations come in and are really key. So, because people can interpret their own results incorrectly often, we find, especially when they're new to it the first couple times. So
what are some examples of minerals that you think are important? So you mentioned magnesium.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned iodine, which I think is important for the thyroid.
Yeah, iodine's really it's the number one mineral for thyroid function. Yeah, good job there. And manganese as well. Manganese is great for, say, blood sugar, for example. So that's one we'll talk about here. We'll optimize that for you a little bit with upgraded sugar support that has some manganese in it that you'll actually absorb. There's other food sources, of course, you can get these things from, but the problem becomes, was the soil depleted that grew this? Like, forget if it's organic or not. That's a great place to start. But was the soil, in a place where it could offer the Brazil nut that you're eating and you're trying to get selenium from? Where are we on that spectrum? So it's much more dependable to find a source you can trust and then use that, rely on that instead of kind of guessing again, really, with the food intake. It also becomes quite expensive to get enough of a certain thing from a certain plant or nut or product that you're eating.
All right, so let's maybe dive into my test results, and I think it would be useful to maybe set a context just so that everybody is on the same page here. So I took this test about 2 weeks ago, I think, 3 weeks ago, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So as we're recording this, we're in the middle of August 2019. And I took it, like I said, 2-3 weeks ago. It was a little bit after a month of vacationing through Europe, where I ate, like a little healthy, but also a little unhealthy. Generally, over the last year and a half, been following a pretty conformed keto diet. So relatively low carb, high fats, moderate protein. Been working a lot on my fitness and stuff. I think generally I could always eat more greens, and I'll be curious to see if that translates into some of the things that you've seen in the test results. But overall, pretty healthy guy. I think I could always do better. And so I'm really curious to see, based on the test results, what we're going to get here. And again, I have not heard what the results were. So Barton is literally revealing this to me for the first time.
Very brave of you. Very brave of you. No, I commend you, because I think a lot of people will see this valuable. So, thanks for stepping up. Just want to acknowledge you there. But yeah, good news, folks. He's going to make it. There's a couple of things I always say when I talk to people about testing before we talk about results. And one, that is just remember why you took the test in the first place. and know that if there was nothing to optimize, there'd be no reason to test. So there's certainly, it's good news that you're finding things and you're taking action on them, right? It'd be kind of like ignoring your finances and your business and just hoping things go well, not a great strategy. So, and then the other thing, just whatever the results are, just remembering to just keep it in mind that, again, you're taking action. So don't stress about whatever they may be. All right. So jumping in, a couple of things, I'd like to start with a few questions. Is there any symptoms that you notice in your health that you wouldn't mind sharing? I don't know if you have any or not, that you might label as, say, fatigue or trouble focusing, dizziness, even, and this is a strange one, trouble remembering dreams, which it turns out we should all be dreaming nightly.
Ooh, yeah, great question. I've always thought that I'm a terrible memorizer of dreams. So I do think that I have dreams, but literally as soon as I wake up, there's just no memory of it whatsoever. So that's the first thing I would say. The other thing would be, I think my sleep is pretty inconsistent. There's some weeks I do really well, some weeks I don't. So that's one thing. Generally, I have like the most energy in the morning. In the afternoon, it kind of starts dipping. Or some other things you were saying?
Yeah, dizziness, ringing in the ears, anything like that?
No.
Okay. Well, great. Some of those can be addressed through lifestyle hacks, which we'll discuss. Sleep hygiene, for example, circadian rhythm, things like that. But kind of getting into what we're looking at specifically here is, I know that, you're succeeding and you're doing well, and yet there's definitely some markers here that between the numbers, again, for people listening, what I'm looking at is 15 different nutritional elements, 8 toxic elements, and then 7 significant ratios. This is all included in one test. So from this, we have a view into TAN's metabolism. We have a view into stress level. We have a view into a number of different things that we'll discuss.
Can we maybe start off with some positives? Just to ease
certainly.
myself into it.
Yeah. So overall, what's great is that your heavy metals are really clean. Like you must be eating really well, clean, water sources and food and everything like that. The other things that come up are that when we look at your significant ratios that drive a lot of things in the body, these are more important than the individual mineral status themselves. That you have a number of places that look quite ideal, actually. And it's really just the ones that have room for optimization that we want to focus on. So,
okay, so no heavy metals.
Yeah.
So when people eat, for example, a lot of salmon or fish, people always talk about that. Is that like a big source of like heavy metals?
Yeah, there's certain fish out there, higher in the food chain, like tuna and mackerel, that are known these days for having higher levels of things like mercury. But there's all sorts of things that we do pick up for just walking around in our congested cities and breathing air in, and while you're in Beijing or New York City or even Austin. So that's some thoughts too. But yeah, I know you're traveling a lot. That can lead to jet fuel, and that can lead to picking up different elements. But yeah, the thought here, I think, would be to zoom in and look at. So you have your different ratios: calcium to potassium, sodium to potassium, zinc to copper, iron to copper, magnesium to calcium. These different ratios really drive so many things in the body. So looking at your calcium to phosphorus, this is actually really good. This is more than just a number in a ratio. You go, well, what does that really mean? That represents, and a lot of people don't know this, even if they do these analyses for people, but what that really represents is a window into your metabolism and your nervous system, specifically whether you're in parasympathetic or sympathetic. And, if that's kind of overloading anyone listening, don't worry about that, because what we ultimately do is just tell you what you need to do based on this. So we don't just give you the roadmap, we help you interpret it. So you're good there. The next area is, say, sodium to potassium that we could look at. You're a bit low there, just a touch low. So we'd want to bring that up. What that really represents is renal function or kidney function. That can often be due to inflammation, but I know now you're doing a lot of things. You've made some changes that are really good recently in your health. I think that'll help a lot. Cold water helps with that, inflammation, for example. But yeah, you know, we can see basically a pattern of the body holding on to potassium and sodium a bit more than it probably would. The other potential there is just that we need to open up the detoxification system a bit more. So making elimination common and regular is one thing in addition to sweating that can really help. Because when we detox and we're going to the bathroom regularly, that means our body's not recycling those toxins and reuptaking them. So that's a real big win there. And, you know, things like that can be common when we're doing a lot of things like traveling often. You're like, well, you gotta, you know, hold it and go to the bathroom in 6 hours and not right now. So, and then that can develop into habits and patterns. And then now we're prioritizing work and we're deprioritizing our body. Our body's like tapping us softly, or sometimes not so softly. It starts off with a soft whisper like, hey, here's a little headache. I'm gonna send this your way, and you figure out what it means. And then sometimes it's, hey, I can't sleep at all tonight. And these are just examples, not necessarily connected, but something that can really play a part in that too is that we touched on, or I mentioned earlier, circadian rhythm. So one thing I would suggest for you is just go out as soon as you wake up every morning and get 5 or 10 minutes of sunlight or ambient light if you're up before the sun, or a blue light early in the morning will help actually wake you up and trigger your circadian rhythm so that you're ready to, I know you don't have a problem going to bed early, but you know, you can also have some late nights and they can be productive late nights, but it will trigger the brain, that circadian rhythm to basically start. So that's really good. And then the whole nervous system starts to regulate, and then the endocrine system starts to regulate. And one thing that we'll talk about here that's not a product that we offer, but that I think will help you in this area and a couple others, is taking a CBD that you'll actually absorb. So yeah, so that's also something here that I'd recommend. Other things, this ratio would suggest that you want to do more things like going in float tanks or meditating, doing yoga. You also want to take some lithium. You're a little bit low on the lithium side, so I'll recommend something specific there for you. But the CBD really regulates the whole endocrine system. For women, there's receptors in the brain and also the uterus. For men, the testes, the prostate, but also the entire spinal column and just the brain. So the endocrine system. So it really regulates lots of different things. The problem is a lot of people just don't absorb it very well. What else? Oh, I guess we could put that in the notes. The link, I can provide a link there. But that product is really, really great. I don't love how they actually distribute it, but frankly, I'd be remiss if I didn't offer it to people because it works better than any of the 20 other brands I've tried. Their absorption is liposomal, and it's just to get technical for a second. They're under that threshold of size of molecules so that you actually don't have to digest it. It goes straight into your cells and you feel it. You sleep better first night.
Which product is this?
It's called Recept, and I took it for a while personally before I started recommending it, but it's pretty incredible and what it can do for people. It helped my dad, for example, who has prostate cancer. I helped him put it into remission, and that was prior to taking this product, to be fair, but his sleep was really dysregulated because his whole endocrine system was dysregulated. And again, there's receptors in the prostate. So he started taking this, and, my dad's in great health otherwise, but he's 74. So a little bit of support there was certainly, needed. And he's sleeping about 3.5 hours a night uninterrupted. And, now, like the very first night, I remember we actually had a house full of people for Father's Day. And, I asked him how he slept the next morning, first night, and a lot of the family tried it, and he said, yeah, I slept till 5 a.m., which was a huge improvement for him. Normally he's waking up around 3:30, just like clockwork. And yeah, it's been great since. So what that means too is the body's then able to heal itself a lot better because you're sleeping, you're repairing, you're getting inflammation out of the body. So there's about 300 different pathways that helps with. This one also doesn't have THC, so that's great. But moving on, it's a one area that can be a huge win. So yeah, we can put a link in the show notes there that I'll get to you. The other is calcium to potassium. So a bit low here. You just want to boost that by eating things that are higher in copper, since that's actually related to this ratio, and then boosting your cobalt. So that's interesting. Way we can boost cobalt is actually taking a good B vitamin supplement. So I'll recommend one there. Seeking Health is a good one. It's a B vitamin complex. It's methylated. They do a good job with their supplements. Yeah, so that can bring that up, and basically that ratio is responsible for thyroid expression, or is a window into the world of how your thyroid's expressing, and your adrenals as well. So it's definitely an important one, and not critically low or anything, but just barely on that phase. So again, a little room for optimization. And what does that really mean? It means that now Tan will have more energy, since the thyroid is really the energy system of the body.
Thanks to Grammarly for supporting our podcast. Grammarly is a communication tool that helps people improve their writing to be mistake-free, clear, and effective. They encourage everyone, even the best students and top professionals, to use Grammarly to do their best work and accomplish even more of their goals. This episode is about optimizing your health, but now I want to talk about optimize your written communication. You can do that productively with Grammarly. Grammarly is a great writing assistant that will make you look and sound smarter, and it's available almost anywhere you write, in your web browser, on the desktop, and even on mobile. You can start for free and have Grammarly check your spelling and grammar, but Grammarly Premium will also check advanced punctuation, structure, style within context, and give you vocabulary suggestions. It will even check for conciseness and readability, and it will tailor that to the different type of writing that you do. I appreciate the browser extension. I use it in Chrome. Even if I'm not writing a large document, I love how it catches little errors or suggests improvements. Since a lot of what I do is customer facing, I always want to show that as a company, we value attention to detail. And thanks to their premium features, it makes sure that my writing is concise and doesn't rely on overused filler words. Grammarly is offering the Productivity Show listeners 20% off a Grammarly Premium account today. Go to Grammarly.com/TPS to get 20% off your Grammarly Premium account today. That's Grammarly.com/TPS for 20% off your Grammarly Premium accounts. So can I jump in real quick before we go even further?
Sure.
So a couple thoughts that came to mind. First one is, so I took the blood test last year, and I had a functional medicine doctor analyze it for me. Because when you take it on the wellness effects, it will show you like, this is red, this is green. And even then, I still don't know what that means, but I went to a functional medicine doctor. And then I think he said to me that I don't have enough copper in my body. And he actually recommended that. And again, when I was reading the results on the website, it didn't tell me that. But he was able to interpret that somehow, because obviously that's his job. So he told me to start taking beef liver and something else, like sunflower something.
Yeah. So beef liver is a great place. I think you'd start. That will also help provide your body some nutrients. It's interesting how nutrient packed that particular organ is. And from a diet perspective, I think you're doing a lot of things right. If someone out there listening is not opposed to eating animal products, then eating nose to tail is a great thing to do for yourself and the planet for a lot of different reasons. We don't have to necessarily go into that now. But those organs can be really, really beneficial. And believe it or not, there are some ways to make liver taste really, really good. I do it in coconut cream and create kind of like an Indian dish with it. And it's incredible.
One of my favorite things is buying the pate at Whole Foods.
Yes.
And then just putting it on whatever I want to eat. It's delicious. And so
that's a great hack for a good snack if you're on the go.
Oh, yeah. It's the truffle pate. So I'll see if I can find a link somewhere and add it in there. But that's one of my favorite things to buy and eat because it's so delicious. And it's what the doctor said.
For sure. Yeah. And then just like finding grass-fed whenever you can, because we really do vote with our dollars. So we'll have more grass-fed things. It's good for soil regeneration, which is good for planet long-term and also near-term.
So what's interesting is I started taking that a year ago, and I would say I'm pretty consistent. Out of the 7 days, I'd probably say like 6 days out of the week I would take my supplements. But it's interesting to see that based on the recent test results that you've had, I could still do an even better job. So I might increase my dosage or something.
Yeah, I think that's great. We could actually even try a copper supplement until the next test and see how your levels move. We'll have a copper supplement out soon. We're also putting out a thyroid product very, very soon. Probably by the time people look at it, it'll be called Peak Thyroid. And it's just the 4 minerals your thyroid needs most to perform at its best. So in a form you can actually absorb. So if I had that for you right now, I might recommend it. Yeah. It's pretty good, but yeah, it looks like you have another thought too.
Yeah. So the other one that just came to mind, I believe it was the sodium potassium ratio. I think it was like the second one you mentioned earlier. But the first thing that came to my mind was I started recently really taking more electrolytes or electrolyte powder because one, Texas heats are brutal, but also I started working out a lot more and drinking more water and stuff. And so I thought, it would be, from what I know, that having more electrolytes is always a good thing, usually. So I thought, by increasing my sodium intake that way, like that would improve that. But that's only something I really start doing maybe in the last, actually since the start of the test that I took with you.
There we go. Yeah. Yeah, that's another valuable thing about testing is that when we start putting our results in, we do start thinking about what we're doing even more. And that's a hidden benefit in itself.
So you would say, based on the test results, I should take more sodium?
I would say on the test results right now, what we want to do is we actually want to increase although it might look counterintuitive, we want to increase your magnesium with, say, Upgraded Magnesium, and that will have a balancing effect on your sodium, potassium, calcium. And you'll sleep better, and then you already manage stress really well, and you think in systems really well, as people know that listen to this podcast. But it will give you an even more calm, steady focus because you talked about your readiness score being kind of good one night and then not so good the other, and this will help with that, no doubt. Actually, so will the CBD. It'll help regulate that sleep pattern. So first night you'll probably wake up more rested with a combination of those. And then the circadian rhythm thing like that. And then from a lifestyle perspective, something we can run through right now, since it makes sense, is wearing a sleeping mask and blocking out really all light in the bedroom, and then not doing devices for at least 30 minutes, but maybe an hour before bed. If you can find some sort of way to substitute that, your mental health is going to go up. Just generally for people listening, your mental health will increase just if you do that. If you just don't check your phone for the first 30 minutes, or maybe even if you start there, it'll grow to an hour possibly, but at least 30 minutes to an hour is where you want to be with devices, because you owe yourself that time, frankly. You live one life. I think you need to have some some solitude, and to be able to create instead of react is a great place to come from. So
yeah, one simple change that I recently did, not recently, like a year ago, is I used to charge my phone next to my bed, but I recently just put it into my living room. So when I go to bed, when I turn around, there's no phone. I literally have to get out of bed to grab my phone. Mm-hmm. So there's absolutely no need for me to have my phone with me in my bedroom. So that's a really simple thing, but yeah, super simple, but yeah, powerful.
And for those of you that are like, I'm too busy for that, Ariana Huffington in her book, she talked about that too. And she's doing a lot, obviously, and she has the same sort of approach to that sleep hygiene protocol that you just mentioned. So I'd say you're on the right track.
So more magnesium.
Yeah. It's a great balancer for you, and that will help your kidneys be in a more optimal kind of rested place too. Would you say currently that you're consuming lots of protein or like lots of fat? Do you feel like you're overeating in any way? I mean, knowing you, I would say that's not true, but I don't know.
I would say the protein is definitely more than what it used to be. Mm-hmm. I'm like 160 pounds right now, and I eat roughly 160 grams of protein every day.
Okay, Got it. Yeah, we could back that down actually, and you'll be surprised. And that's something that I'm seeing: the potassium being high, sodium being kind of elevated. Is the kidneys are telling us something there, and to build more, I guess.
But how am I supposed to get those gains though?
Yeah, the gains, right? Like, just a backstory for other people too. You have two brothers that are pretty ripped too, and you're really fit, and just wanting to get more and more. What would you say your goals are?
Well, I want to put on more muscle, so that's why I start working out, doing more strength training. Mm. And I would say that's my focus for the next 6 to 8 months, is to put on more muscle and then lean out, so lose excess body fat. So that's why my protein intake has gone up quite a bit over the last, I would say, 4 months. Because it used to be about 80 grams a day, roughly, because that's more like ketogenic, or if you follow keto.
Yeah,
strict.
certainly.
But since
it's a good tool. I look at all diets as being tools.
Right.
And sometimes it's a temporary tool, and sometimes it's a long-term tool, depends on the individual. Yeah.
Because for me, my blood sugars have always been pretty high. And something I've noticed too is I have those like blood meters at home. So I usually measure myself every morning, and I noticed, this is before I even started doing, or actually when I first started doing keto, I started measuring my ketones, but also my blood sugars. And I noticed when I was waking up, my blood sugars were like over 100 each morning, which when I looked it up online, kind of showed like pre-diabetic like ranges. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is not good. So, and I've always sort of knew that, because I always thought that I was like quote unquote carb sensitive. If I ate a lot of carbs, my weight would just go up really fast. And then you have, those people talk about body types like endomorphs, ectomorphs, mesomorphs and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thought right there, though, that we're going to get to is that because your vanadium, which is probably something a lot of people haven't heard of before, but that we test for, that's a little bit low, and we see that pattern with manganese too, and zinc, and your chromium looks good actually, but what we'll also recommend is 1 bottle of upgraded glucose support that has vanadium in it, and then upgraded sugar support that has manganese in it. And just, you can take one when you're done with the first bottle, just start on the second. And it'll give you different things, and that will help you be less carb sensitive. It just changes the relationship or improves the relationship between insulin and blood glucose.
Wait, what is this miracle product that you were talking about?
These are just designed as exactly for that, and it helps you with basically intaking sugar and utilizing it properly. So when the body's out of these particular minerals I just mentioned, it really just sort of panics when you take in a lot of sugar or even simple carbs. So yeah, there's some effect there. One thing I wanted to ask you too is with gluten, are you avoiding that, or are you eating that? For example, do you like ramen? I mean, who doesn't? But are you?
I'm Asian. Of course, I like ramen. But generally, I don't really avoid it. I don't think I have a gluten sensitivity. I took an allergy test last year as well, and people who've been listening to the podcast know I've been on this health binge for the last year and a half, really trying to do all sorts of different things. But yeah, I took an allergy test
in the right place. Then
yeah, no sensitivities whatsoever except for raspberries, which is just a random thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems with food sensitivity. I do like certain genetic tests. I find those to be more valuable, and people can understand their hair test results, and then they can think back to what their genetics were, what those results were, if they worked with someone to get them interpreted and match those up. But food sensitivity has a couple different problems that I warn people away from typically. Often, like the foods that you ate recently will show up just as a standard of fact in your results. So you'd probably just eaten raspberries or something. The other thing is the extrusion method that virtually all, not all, but virtually all companies use there is really difficult. So they're not cleaning well enough between samples. So you're getting contamination between Sally and your test, or your test and Sally's. It's like, it's not ideal, and that's unfortunate truth of current state testing in that area. So don't worry about it if you like raspberries.
Right. Yeah, I'll be fine.
One thought though that you could really just give it as an experiment. I really believe in experiments. Is cut out gluten for the next 21 days and see how you feel, and then introduce it back in. But do a minimum of 3 weeks, because it takes a good solid week at least to get rid of even most of the symptoms. That will allow your body to heal itself. And we already saw the sodium to potassium, a potential inflammation sort of thing. So that's why I'm thinking gluten. Even if your genetics say you shouldn't have a real problem with it, it's inflammatory to everyone. I mean, again, I try to speak from a place of science and not opinion. When that molecule is digested, it becomes like low-grade sandpaper in your gut. So if you want more of that, or if you're not worried about that, then just skip this part and don't listen to it. And go, you know what, I'm going to eat my sandwiches. But there's so many easy alternatives now to just not eating it, that it rarely feels like a sacrifice, to be honest.
Yeah, so when I think about what I eat on a day-to-day basis, there's really not that much gluten.
Yeah, I wouldn't think there is if you're in keto often.
But what you're seeing is that because my inflammatory levels are somewhat high, it could potentially be gluten. What are some other potential sources?
Yeah, so what we could do is instead of doing food sensitivity, we could do a food elimination diet for a short amount of time. So what I would recommend in this case is, since your metabolism is showing a little, it's more on the slower side, and it wouldn't necessarily, I would say it shouldn't necessarily be that place, knowing what you're doing and your lifestyle and everything. That is something that is probably bogging down the metabolism. So the other things you might be sensitive to, what really the best way to approach it would be to say, all right, what would happen if we ate salmon and avocado for the next 3 days exclusively, or grass-fed beef, it needs to be grass-fed for the next 3 days. If that sounds crazy, that's okay, but I'll explain why. So when you really eliminate, say, things that have like fungus or growth bacteria, like nuts, a lot of nuts and seeds have this like bacteria with them. Even coffee can have it. It can have a mold on it that can cause a reaction, different types of reactions in the body. And when we cut those out, we suddenly feel a lot better. Our hair, skin, and nails look better. That's one outward sign to know that you're doing pretty well. Brain function, mood, things like that. Brain fog might disappear for a few days. And then you're, at least temporarily, you're on the right track. And again, that's not necessarily a diet that I'd recommend for people, but it's really, really helpful for a lot of people. And if you think back to our ancestors, they would, say, kill a deer and eat just deer and water for 3 days, right? So is it really that crazy to suggest that you only eat, say, grass-fed beef for 3 days? Because polyphenols, they fight for like a receptor essentially in the body that same nutrient is trying to get you nutrients from, say, the grass-fed beef you're eating. So I'd love to see you do that. And I think pretty certain, based on your calcium to phosphorus ratios, your metabolism will also increase by doing that. And you'll probably just feel a natural boost in testosterone. And we'll take some of the load off your kidneys in the processing of that amount of protein. We only eat, say, 100, 120 grams of protein. In that window, you'll see some things shift for sure. And if you feel good after 3 days, you can extend it for a week, see how you feel. And that is probably the first time people are hearing that. That's why I wanted to say it, because it's valuable. First time I heard it too, I went, well, let me dive into the science of this and see where the science really is. But that's the simplest, most straightforward method I can give people.
Yeah, it's interesting because on a day-to-day basis, I feel, pretty okay. Mm-hmm. And, if I look at, for example, my Oura Ring stats, sometimes my readiness will be in a high range. So generally it's really surprising for me to hear this, that there's another level that I can go to, even though it's pretty okay already. But there's like another level I can go to where
certainly
maybe I don't even know what it is like to feel that way. And that's kind of exciting too.
Wow, you touch on an amazingly important point, is that most of us have forgotten what feeling great and vibrant and healthy really feels like. It's true. Yeah. And really the first step in that is not guessing, but testing. Guessing is what the first step is for most people. And just going, well, I'm sure I need this particular supplement. I'm low in calcium, right? They say you should take calcium, or I should take it then, right? That, for example, almost no one is low in calcium, or even if they are low, their ratios as holistically suggest that they shouldn't be supplementing that mineral.
Right. So like another common suggestion that a lot of people make is, they hear about how we're sitting inside the whole time, we're not getting enough sunlight, so we should take in more vitamin D. Like, is that some sort of truth to that, in your opinion?
Yeah, certainly we should be getting 10 or 15 minutes of sunlight on bare skin each day. It doesn't have to be all at once. If people are going, whoa, I am really pale and I will burn so quickly if I do that, do it in 3-minute or 5-minute increments. But yeah, first thing in the morning and around solar noon is great for regulating. And that's something else we see, although we don't test for vitamins directly with this hair mineral analysis that we do with upgraded formulas, is that the central thing is the window holistically. So I can look at your calcium and have a window into what your vitamin D is like, because those are connected. Yeah.
So does that look good there, or
you're looking good there. That's
perfect.
Yeah, some wins. Yeah, certainly.
So what are some other things that you're seeing?
Yeah, certainly. So the zinc to copper ratio is definitely fixable. We can do that by bringing up your copper, like we talked about. That ratio shows us, if it's extreme, which yours is not, shows us the balance between if someone's had a viral infection, either ongoing or in the past potentially, or a bacterial infection. So that's another interesting window. Just thought I'd mention it. Yeah, pretty good there. We'll just increase copper, and that'll regulate and push out some of the zinc.
So one thing I've heard from sort of alternative people, let's just label it this way, is if you want to increase your copper intake, just drink from copper cups.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of that idea?
I would say that it's very much, again, going back to intuition, and I love intuition. I just use it for other things, and why I label it as intuition is that you don't really know how many milligrams of copper you're getting per day or per week or per month when you use that approach. So you want some sort of standardization, and that's why we, third-party test everything we do, and it's essential to know, like, all right.
That's a very good and safe answer.
Yeah.
Okay, so more copper. So how do I get more copper?
Yeah, you can get more copper by supplementing or by eating foods high in copper. Avocados is great. It's a pretty low allergy for virtually all people.
So I should eat more guac.
Yeah, more guac. So
perfect.
Yeah, who doesn't like more guac? So that's an easy win. And just you can make your own choice by just looking up foods high in copper and just choosing from that list and going, oh, well, I really don't like this. So I'll leave that part up to you and give you a little homework there. The sodium to magnesium, we're good there as a ratio, by the way. That shows adrenal expression. And then just looking at the other two, calcium to magnesium and iron to copper. Iron to copper, or copper to iron, that's your SOD pathway, thyroid function, things like that. Can also be neurological disturbance. Well, ladies and gentlemen, TAN is sitting at basically perfect there. So that ratio is pretty good, and that makes sense because, you're very focused and organized and,
So if that was
gathered.
Out of whack, what would you suggest?
Well, different signs. If that was out of whack, you would see like ADHD behavior in someone from a behavioral pattern, and it would depend on which direction it was out of whack. So that could be increasing iron, and there's a number of different ways, like, through food or through increasing copper through supplements or food. So those are a couple of ideas.
Were you suggesting that what was that ratio again? Could you essentially check if somebody has ADHD based on that ratio, or? There's
certainly things that, what's great is that someone's going to come in and they're going to know that whether or not they're focusing very well or not. And we can do testing for, your 2-month-old as well. The thing, so a little different, I guess, if they're that young, but let's say they're a young kid that can speak, or maybe it's you as an adult and you're however old you are, you'll have a good idea probably of just through observation of what's working well and what's not. And then we'll look at what levers should be changed in relation to the entire picture, the whole picture. Yeah, so case by case basis, really, I wouldn't want to give something specific there. It's again, going back to the value of the test and the value of the consultation. It's really key. But hey, at least you don't have to drive across town, sit in horrible lighting in a doctor's waiting room, only to get, kind of shoved around by a doctor that is, through no fault of their own. Really, it's the system we're in. They have a few minutes with you, and you have 10 questions. They can answer 3, and those answers may not even be helpful because they didn't have a chance to spend enough time with you or run the right test or be trained in those things because, well, that's a different tangent for another time. But
I will say it did definitely boost my ego that was 100% perfect.
There you go. Some wins.
I mean, setting an example for being able to focus, that's good.
Well, you're a great guy, and you can't be a great person when you simultaneously have a lot of things out of whack. It's just, there would be too much of internal strife or an internal struggle. It would be too much to balance on a personal level. So there are things that, certainly not everything's nutrition. There's a lot of psychosomatic things that go into this, but, nutrition plays a big part. It's a big lever to pull. So that pretty much sums it up. Calcium, magnesium, do it looking pretty good there too. That regulates thyroid and parathyroid. So yeah, we're doing pretty well there. Upgrade iodine is something I'd recommend. Just a bottle of that should be good, just to kind of give you a push in the right direction. Some of the other recommendations would be lithium, just to help manage mood and stress even better. A little bit low on that. For salt, I like pink Himalayan salt or Celtic salt. Those absorb pretty well, and they have some trace minerals. So
you mentioned that the lithium is low. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So is that like a common mineral in foods?
Yeah.
I've literally never heard of that.
It's a central element that, or technically non-essential, but for mood in small doses, that can be helpful. You don't want to over-consume it, certainly, but I think people think of it as being a drug, and it really isn't. It's in that same category as vanadium, where vanadium helps with managing that relationship between insulin and blood glucose and how your body deals with that. So
if I take more of that, does that mean I can have more desserts and be okay?
Real talk though? Yeah. So I would say you would be better off if you're currently eating sweets and you're not going to change that behavior, to take the things that your body needs to control and balance that intake of sugar.
Okay, perfect. Perfect.
Yeah. So those are really some of the top things. The other rec I would have for you is consuming 100 ounces of water a day, 80 to 100. If you take your body weight and split it by half, that's a good place to be at. We talked about sleep hygiene. We talked about circadian rhythm. We talked about devices. We talked about going digital free before bed. One thing that would also help would just be doing a distraction-free weekend. That can really put you in a place to make your body feel safe and healthy to take on more muscle and grow more and be less in a state of fight or flight. And that's true for everyone, really. Just like pulling some of that stress out. Grounding is another way to do that. Or depending on how you recharge too. Maybe that's a relaxing weekend or weekend camping trip with friends. But getting out in nature more is a good way to regulate that as well. So those are some thoughts, just holistically, lifestyle based. Yeah. What'd you think of that? Was that helpful?
Yeah. Well, it makes me think about certain things that I can do. So as an example, I go to a flow tank maybe once a month.
For people listening, that's a sensory deprivation tank that is really interesting. And you can get in, it's like meditation on steroids. You have some really interesting thoughts. I personally do a lot of problem solving there. But what's your experience like?
Yeah, I go once a month, and I just lay down there just to mostly feel relaxed and just clear my mind. And it's interesting because I meditate roughly 10 minutes a day and go to a flow tank once a month. And I have found that to be extremely helpful for just managing stress and being able to focus and feel more calm and everything.
Do you do that in the morning?
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you thought about adding 10 minutes in the evening after work between work and, say, social activity, just to kind of wash the day away?
I have thought about that, which I'm pretty sure most people will probably echo that too.
They're like, yeah, we think about it all the time. Rarely do it though.
Yeah, it's kind of the idea of, okay, if I get my 10-minute meditation in every day, then I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also considered doing it before going to bed, as an example, to see if that would help me sleep better.
It would. Yeah. Yeah. It increases your deep sleep in many cases. There's some studies out there on that.
Yeah, so that's one thing I've considered. I've done a few times, but not really consistently. And if I go in with the intention of, hey, this is going to be an experiment, I'm going to put it into my Evernote and say, hey, I'm going to try for 7 days to meditate for 10 minutes a day, and then track in my Aura ring. If that's actually going to change, then that becomes actually a fun project for me, and then I'll actually see interesting things.
That'd be great. Well, I'll definitely be listening to future episodes to hear you report back on something like that. I would say, 21 days is, there's like a few different standards on forming habits, right? That I'm sure you're really familiar with, like 5 days, 21 days, 66 days. There's a couple different numbers, but I find for a lot of people, 21 days is a pretty good sticking point for them. And if you do something like that in the evening, I personally find it's more valuable right after work or toward the end of work. If I can close the door, close the office, and just sit by myself for 10 or 20 minutes in the evening at like 3 and reset. And now the last few hours of work for the day are just incredibly, just immeasurably different often. So it's not even like I'm doing this for myself. It's like I'm doing this for everyone that comes into contact with me and the work I do. And yeah.
A couple months ago, maybe about a year ago, I had Garrett, the founder of NewFit, come on the podcast. And I used their technology. In case you don't know what NewFit is, just check it out, NewFit, Google it. And there's a podcast that we've done where we talk about my rehab from my shoulder surgery and stuff like that. And they have this device that sends electrical signals and stuff like that, which helps stimulate and relax muscles. So if you do a workout, it will be more intense. If you need to rehab, it will like lengthen the muscle and relax and all that stuff, which is awesome.
Yeah, I've been too, actually. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Like I love that place. And one of the things I've learned, because sometimes what Garrett will do, he'll post on Instagram his Aura Ring stats. And I'm always amazed because sometimes it will show 3 hours of deep sleep and 3 hours of REM sleep. And I go, what is this guy taking? Because I clearly want that. And I actually found out through a secondary source, somebody who took the certification program, that they use the Newbie, which is the device that he invented, and they do like a master reset where they put the pads on you somehow and put it on a certain frequency for like 15 minutes. So you're completely relaxed. And then when you go to bed, you apparently get 3 hours of deep sleep and 3 hours of REM sleep, which sounds pretty amazing. But I would like to do that also through supplementation, meditation, and just optimizing my health that way.
Yeah, those things are non-negotiable. It's great to add on different pieces of biohacking technology on top, but you got to get the foundation right. So
when it comes to, for example, taking in these minerals that you mentioned, some of them for me, but also in general for people listening.
Sure.
Is there like a general practice for like, you should eat most things, or you should, try to supplement most things, or should you take certain things with water? Because, I know with certain vitamins, you always want to make sure that you have food with them. And sometimes like it's better to, like certain minerals and vitamins work better when they're combined, right? Like there's all these different factors. Like what is your general take on that?
That's so at least for any of our products, you can take them because the absorption's dramatically different. You don't have to digest them. They go right into, they're small enough to go into your red blood cells, into the mitochondria, and like get to work. And take our magnesium, for example, and you start to feel not sleepy, but just relaxed. So yeah, you can tell it's working. The others are a little more subtle typically in how they affect the body, but they're necessary nonetheless. You can take them without water. They're water soluble. You can take them with or without food. You just want to avoid things like iron typically. So that's really the advice that I would have generally for people. That answer your question?
Yeah. Then the other one I have is people always, think about multivitamins and taking them every day. Something that you recommend?
Yeah, no, not a fan of multivitamins. It's just such a scattershot approach. If someone, really for the person, the average person listening today, you really shouldn't be taking a multivitamin. You should be figuring out what you're low in, what you're high in, and taking, like, basically dosing appropriately with the right things in a form you can absorb. The other thing that I started to mention earlier, I'm glad you asked this again, is, what if, and this happens often, what if you're high in something and then you're taking, say, a multivitamin or just in general, something that is high in that thing or has quite a bit of it. Now what happens is it becomes, picture a seesaw, like from grade school. On the playground there's a seesaw. And that seesaw is heavily weighted on one end and not so heavily on the other. Well, now you just add more weight and it gets worse. And that's really what's happening, except in our body, it's not one seesaw, but a multi-dimensional seesaw. And, the things you start doing on one end of that spectrum affect, they send a ripple throughout the rest of it. So again, having that view, like testing many things and understanding ratios, this is, again, circling back to the test. It's like, just test it. Don't guess.
Right.
Don't just go, oh yeah, I'm going to take this thing. I heard on Bart's blog or Tan's blog or someone that I trust, like, yeah, I should, like, everyone. No, not really. Like, there are a few exceptions, but it's always better to know where you stand.
So what I'm hearing from you is the common advice of you have to take a multivitamin every day to stay healthy. You're basically saying, well, actually, no, don't even take it. You don't really need it. Test, get the data, and then based on what you're lacking, change that. So maybe you'll find out that you need to eat certain foods more often, right? And then eat less of something else.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And then you'll supplement maybe a few more things the first time you do a test, and then the second time maybe a few less, and the third time a few less, and depending on how you're doing. But what we're really doing is we're teaching people how to just be good stewards of their bodies and their brains, and nutritionally kind of giving people their power back around their health instead of them handing their power over to doctors and outsourcing that power and really being bound by it in the process. It's definitely something that I care a lot about.
One of the things that always irks me is how people are super religious about their own diets. And they'll go, no, like paleo is the best, or keto. You got to go keto, or you got to do Whole30 and X, Y, and Z, right? And I think, like you said earlier, nutrition is very important, and what you eat obviously has a huge effect on your mood and your overall health and everything. And I don't think there's like the perfect diet for everybody, right? Everybody is very different. Just like everybody's mineral deficiencies are going to be different. There's no universal standard for, everybody. And that's why taking a test, I think, is so valuable, because you get individualized, feedback essentially for what you need and what you need to do going forward. And that's, I think, if there's anything you take away from today's episode, is literally just get yourself tested.
Yeah, test, and then the consultation is a great place to start. And then it's still your choice if you want to take any action, if you want to purchase any of the supplements, if you want to try to keep taking your own supplements that aren't going to work very well, it's your choice. If you want to try to get it all from food, if you want to try going raw vegan for a month and seeing what happens, I'm not suggesting that, but it's all, again, your options, but at least you have a better place of certainty to start from. And that's really what we're offering people, is just a higher degree of certainty of where they currently stand. Because certain people that are out there supplementing a lot, they start to kind of panic and go, oh man, I wonder if I'm low in selenium, a lot of fine lines, and they read somewhere that selenium helps with anti-aging. And, that's the other thing that I guess we could mention, is that people are spending a lot of money on trying to heal and improve the exterior, when really vibrant health comes from the inside out. And your skin looks better, your hair looks better, your nails look better whenever your mineral status is across the board where it should be. Not high, not low, just dialed in. And you can save on skincare and skin creams and those things your liver has to detoxify anyway, because they often have different things that us chemical engineers developed for you. And if I was in traditional chemical engineering, that is, and they're endocrine disruptors, and they really cause havoc on the whole hormone cycle. So something else to think about.
I think you make a great point there, because a lot of people spend a lot of money on supplements thinking that this is going to help them. Like, you buy omega-3 fish oil and multivitamin, and maybe, get some extra magnesium, and maybe you don't even need it or any of that. And you spend all this money wasting essentially on buying stuff that you really don't need. So I think that's why another reason getting this test is so helpful, because now, the value you're going to get for the dollars you spend on supplements is actually going to be paying off.
Yeah, it goes up.
Right.
Yeah.
Even if the absorption rate is terrible still for some supplements, right? But at least getting a little bit more of what you're lacking is still better than just randomly guessing what you think you need.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, that said, the body can only absorb a certain amount of anything. So you'll see the dosage on some of our products isn't as high as it is for others. And that's because, you're absorbing virtually all of it at a cellular level instead of 10%. So, and yet it's not 10% the cost. But the other reason is that just knowing that, although people, just looking at it holistically from my viewpoint, a lot of people may just go overboard with something if they're allowed to, or if it's easy for them to, and they may only take one of our products without doing any testing, and then now they're driving ratios just out of like crazy. And that's not my goal for people. I really want to empower people in their health, because this has been just absolutely life-changing for me. And yet I know that people can do damage to themselves if they run off really fast in one direction.
So as a general premise, if people want to get better sleep, the typical advice out there is probably take more magnesium. And I've been, in that camp myself where, okay, if I want to improve my sleep, I should take more magnesium. So, for example, I've been taking the Calm supplement, which is 100% magnesium from my understanding. And when I started using it, it definitely helped. But is there anything else that you would add to that or say, or?
Yeah, just as an experiment, try ours. It's been life-changing for a lot of people, frankly. We'll be doing some clinical studies soon, but we have doctors that give it to traumatic brain injury patients that help them resolve TBIs. They use that in concert with hyperbaric oxygen. So if you know someone with a CTE or a TBI, basically think, concussions and brain injury. So it's effective for a number of different things, I guess. Other sleep things, I don't recommend melatonin ever, because it's just something you shouldn't be taking. The body can start to produce less of it. You can become dependent. But yeah, we had a great story, for example, really my message is, when you give your body what it needs and you figure it out first and foremost, what does the body need? Now you're giving it what it needs. Magical things can happen. You can see a Facebook Live on my personal page. I think it may be posted on Upgraded Formulas' Facebook page, but you can go to Barton Scott on the Facebook page, and we'll probably put it up on Instagram at Upgraded Formula soon too. But it's me doing a live with this woman, Lindsay, who has been a health coach. I think I mentioned this briefly, but she's been a health coach for years now, and she has coaches that work for her. And she said during the live that she had been on thyroid meds and sleep meds for a long time. In the case of sleep meds, since it's relevant to this, she's about, I guess, early 40s now, perhaps. She said she started taking it like the first year of college. She's been on sleep medication ever since. And her rationale was, well, at least I'm sleeping. And she had been on magnesium for a long time too. Within, I forget the exact time frame, maybe 1 to 2 months of taking upgraded magnesium, she got off of her sleep meds. I'd love for anyone listening to hear that from her and not from me, so you can see that. But pretty incredible, because she's also very knowledgeable to begin with. And this made a huge difference for her. And just not having that dependency is really huge as well. So that's something that gives me tremendous fulfillment. And I'd share that. So yeah, really And then with the thyroid meds, she was able to increase her thyroid expression using upgrade iodine in her case. So she was a little low on the low thyroid end of the spectrum. So she went and retested and looked at her labs, and her doctor was like, yeah, you can, I don't know what she did, but you can start, trailing off of these. So she mentions that in the live too. And I didn't know she was going to mention that. So I'm kind of shocked. You can see my reaction because it's huge news for someone that knew a lot already about health and is coaching people in health. So that was incredible. Going back to sleep though, really, just pulling out the stress. So like all the things that matter to you, if that's alone time or if that's time with friends, just balancing that spectrum. The CBD that we'll put in the show notes is great, but there's really no substitute for giving your body what it needs.
So Barton, I really loved our episode today, and I think everybody loves it as well with all the insights that you share with us here.
Thank you.
So if people want to find out more about you, Upgraded Formulas, where should they go?
Best place is really the website to find out more about the company, upgradedformulas.com. We can put that in the show notes, I'm sure. If you're okay with it, I can give people a discount code since they're fans of yours.
Sure. For people who are listening, maybe for the first 2 months of the show being live?
Yeah, we can just do it maybe for their first use or something like that.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. We'll create a code. You can just use, I guess, Barton10 at checkout, BARTON, and then 10, and that'll save you 10% off just because tan. So
cool. So upgradedformulas.com, and we'll have everything that we mentioned today in the show notes. So thank you, Barton, for being on the show today.
Such a pleasure. Thank you, brother.
At Asian Efficiency, we believe that you shouldn't have to sacrifice your personal life to get things done. You should be able to get everything done in the time you have. That's why we've built a productivity quiz to help you maximize the time you have, increase your energy, and get you more focused. We've helped tens of thousands of people increase their productivity, and within 2 minutes of taking a productivity quiz, we'll show you exactly what you need to do next to increase your productivity. To take the quiz, just go to theproductivityshow.com/quiz. Again, that URL is theproductivityshow.com/quiz. Don't let your never-ending to-do list drag you down, and stop sacrificing your health and family to get things done. Take the quiz today, and you'll be on your way to becoming superhuman productive. You can also find links to everything we discussed today in the show notes by going to theproductivityshow.com/267. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving us an iTunes review or a star in Overcast. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next Productive Monday.